Facets of Africa, the leadership lineage. Throughout the course of African history, women have been central to power, serving as guardians of wisdom, justice, and continuity. Among the most esteemed figures were the Queen Mothers, leaders who not only shaped nations but also guided kings and defended their communities. These women were far from mere symbolic figures. They possessed genuine authority, skillfully combining political insight with moral vision. This segment continues from the previous exploration of Africa's powerful matriarchs, which highlighted influential figures like Yaa Asantewaa of the Ashanti Empire and Queen Nzinga of Ndongo and Matamba, women whose leadership transformed the notion of rulership. The focus of this second segment will be on the significant contributions of African women in the transition to modern governance, particularly their roles in the struggle for independence. Segment 2. The transition to modern governance. Focus on the women of Africa. The transition from colonial rule to modern governance in Africa marked a profound reconfiguration of leadership, identity, and power. While the narratives of independence often highlight male figures such as Jomo Kenyatta, Kwame Nkrumah, and Julius Nyerere, the contributions of women were equally transformative. Women not only resisted colonial domination but also redefined leadership by merging indigenous values with the emerging ideals of modern statehood. Their influence ensured that the moral and communal foundations of African societies remained integral to the continent's political rebirth. Women were the custodians of indigenous leadership values. In pre-colonial Africa, women held diverse and influential leadership roles, as queens, spiritual leaders, advisors, and mediators in governance systems that valued balance and collective decision-making. Figures such as Yaa Asantewaa of the Ashanti Empire, who led armies in defense of sovereignty, and Queen Amina of Zazzau, who expanded her kingdom through diplomacy and warfare, exemplified the depth of women's authority. These leaders embodied indigenous principles of governance rooted in service, justice, and communal welfare. Colonialism disrupted these systems by imposing patriarchal governance models that marginalized women's authority and redefined power through Western frameworks. Yet, women continued to act as custodians of indigenous ethics, preserving oral traditions, mediating conflicts, and sustaining community cohesion. Their leadership remained grounded in the belief that power must serve the collective, a philosophy that would later shape post-colonial governance and the moral vision of modern African states. The disruption and reassertion of female authority. The colonial experience often marginalized women both politically and economically. However, it also sparked new forms of resistance. Women organized protests, boycotts, and social movements that challenged colonial rule and gender exclusion. In Nigeria, Funmilayo Ransome Kuti, the leader of the Abeokuta Women's Union, rallied women to oppose colonial taxation and championed women's political rights. In Kenya, Mekatilili wa Menza led the Giriama people in rebellion against British exploitation, drawing upon ancestral traditions of freedom and dignity. Throughout the continent, women emerged as formidable agents of change, intertwining the quest for national liberation with the fight for gender equality. It is so important to recognize the incredible women whose contributions to Africa's independence movements have often been overlooked in history. Across the continent, women played powerful roles as leaders, organizers, and visionaries, shaping the course of liberation and nation-building. In West Africa, Constance Cummings John, Sierra Leone, one of Africa's first female mayors, she was a strong advocate for education and women's empowerment during the independence era. Hannah Cudjoe, Ghana, a key organizer in Kwame Nkrumah's Convention People's Party, she mobilized women to support independence and social reform. In East Africa, Mekatilili wa Menza, Kenya, a fearless Giriama leader who led resistance against British colonial rule through traditional oaths and community unity. Muthoni wa Karima, Kenya, a senior female commander in the Mau Mau uprising, she became a symbol of women's active role in armed resistance. Bibi Titi Mohammed, Tanzania. A founding member of TANU and close ally of Julius Nyerere, she inspired and organized women in the independence struggle. Nyabingi priestesses, Uganda, Rwanda. Spiritual leaders who combined religious authority with political activism, leading anti-colonial resistance movements. In Central Africa, Pauline Lumumba, Congo. The widow of Patrice Lumumba, she became a symbol of resilience and dignity, advocating for justice and African unity after his assassination. André Blouin, Central African Republic. A political activist and Pan-Africanist who worked alongside leaders like Sékou Touré and Kwame Nkrumah to advance independence and women's rights. In Southern Africa, Albertina Sisulu, South Africa. A key figure in the anti-apartheid movement, she championed education, healthcare, and women's political participation. Winnie Madikizela Mandela, South Africa. A prominent anti-apartheid activist who endured imprisonment and exile, embodying resistance and defiance. Ruth First, South Africa. A journalist and intellectual who exposed injustices under apartheid and contributed to liberation thought. Lillian Ngoyi, South Africa. The first woman elected to the ANC's Executive Committee, she led major protests against apartheid pass laws. Charlotte Maxseek, South Africa. Founder of the Bantu Women's League, she laid the groundwork for early political mobilization against racial and gender oppression. In North Africa, Hudasha Arawi, Egypt. A pioneering feminist and nationalist, she founded the Egyptian Feminist Union and connected women's emancipation with the broader fight for national liberation. Jamila Bouhired, Algeria. A revolutionary fighter in the Algerian War of Independence, she became an enduring icon of anti-colonial resistance. Zora Drif, Algeria. A lawyer and freedom fighter who played a crucial role in the National Liberation Front's urban resistance operations. Pan-African and diaspora influences. Amy Ashwood Garvey, Jamaica, Ghana. Co-founder of the Universal Negro Improvement Association, she later worked in West Africa promoting Pan-African unity and women's empowerment. Mabel Dove Danquah, Ghana. A journalist, writer, and politician who used her voice to advocate for independence and gender equality. These women's stories remind us that the struggle for freedom went beyond politics. It was a fight for equality, dignity, and the transformative strength of collective action. Their movements were more than acts of resistance. They embodied a legacy of leadership. By reshaping traditional organizing practices, like communal gatherings and shared decision-making, into tools of modern political activism, women reaffirmed their authority and vision. Their work paved the way for inclusive systems of governance rooted in participation, integrity, and shared responsibility. Integrating tradition with modern statecraft. As African nations approached independence, women's activism evolved from resistance to reconstruction. They became educators, legislators, and community organizers who sought to integrate indigenous values into modern governance. The communal ethics of pre-colonial societies, emphasizing cooperation, empathy, and shared responsibility, found echoes in the political philosophies of leaders like Nyerere's Ujamaa, familyhood, and Nkrumah's consciencism. Women's organizations across the continent championed social justice, education, and healthcare, aligning with the traditional belief that leadership must nurture the well-being of all. Their advocacy for equality and social reform reflected a synthesis of ancestral wisdom and modern democratic ideals. In this way, women became the moral compass of post-colonial governance, ensuring that modernization did not sever the link between leadership and community ethics. The persistence of communal leadership ethics. Even after independence, women continued to shape governance through both formal and informal channels. Female politicians, activists, and community leaders carried forward the indigenous ethos of consensus and moral integrity. Their leadership styles often emphasized dialogue, reconciliation, and collective progress, principles deeply rooted in African traditions of governance. From grassroots peacebuilding initiatives to national policymaking, women's influence reinforced the idea that leadership is not merely about authority but about service and moral stewardship. Their continued presence in political and civic life demonstrates the enduring relevance of indigenous leadership philosophies in modern African democracies. In conclusion, the transition to modern governance in Africa cannot be fully understood without acknowledging the central role of women. From pre-colonial custodians of moral authority to modern political activists, African women have continuously shaped the continent's political and ethical landscape. Their leadership, rooted in community, justice, and resilience, ensured that Africa's path to independence was not only a political transformation but also a moral and cultural renaissance. In the next segment, Women at the Helm, we explore the powerful resurgence of women in political leadership across Africa. From Ellen Johnson Sirleaf's groundbreaking presidency in Liberia to Samia Suluhu Hassan's steady leadership in Tanzania, these women are redefining governance with empathy, inclusivity, and moral authority. We'll also trace the roots of their leadership styles back to Africa's ancestral queen mothers, figures who guided their communities with wisdom and balance. This segment uncovers how traditional matriarchal values continue to shape modern governance, and how today's women leaders are navigating both the challenges and triumphs of leading nations in a changing world.